While Armageddon got all the glory with Bruce Willis and Aerosmith, the other 1998 Comet movie harbored secrets that are far stranger than fiction. From presidential earring requests to tragic real-life parallels, zoo animals requiring jaguar warnings, and a soundtrack recycled into a Robin Williams robot film, Deep Impact's behind-the-scenes stories prove truth is indeed weirder than any disaster scenario. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Deep Impact. Morgan Freeman's rejected presidential earring. When Morgan Freeman was cast as President Beck in Deep Impact, the legendary actor had a very specific vision for how he wanted to portray the leader of the free world during humanity's darkest hour. Freeman approached director Mimi Leder with an unusual request that would have given his presidential character a distinctive edge that audiences had never seen before in a disaster film. Freeman specifically asked Leder if President Beck could wear an earring throughout the movie, believing this small but noticeable detail would add personality and make the character feel more relatable and human. The actor felt that having the president wear jewelry would help distinguish Beck from the typical stoic, buttoned-up political figures that moviegoers were accustomed to seeing on screen, especially during crisis situations. However, Leder firmly declined Freeman's creative suggestion, explaining that she felt an earring would be too distracting for audiences and might pull focus away from the gravity of the extinction-level event storyline. The director was concerned that viewers would become fixated on this unconventional presidential accessory rather than staying emotionally invested in the comet crisis and the human drama unfolding around it. Interestingly, while Leder rejected the earring idea, she did allow some of Freeman's personal style to slip through in other ways. In several scenes where President Beck addresses the nation from the Oval Office, Freeman's sleeves are rolled up, and one of the actor's real tattoos is actually visible on screen. Leder liked this authentic touch because she felt it gave the president an everyman quality that made him seem more approachable and genuine during the unprecedented global crisis. This behind-the-scenes detail reveals how even A-list actors like Freeman actively collaborate with directors to shape their characters, sometimes pushing creative boundaries that don't always make it to the final cut, while other personal touches end up enhancing the performance in unexpected ways. The tragic Eugene Shoemaker. Parallel, one of the most chilling coincidences in Deep Impact, involves the tragic real-life death of astronomer Eugene Shoemaker, whose passing eerily paralleled a key plot point in the film just months before its release. In the movie, Dr. Marcus Wolf, the astronomer who discovers the deadly comet heading toward Earth, dies in a car crash while rushing to alert of authorities about the impending disaster. Eugene Shoemaker was a world-renowned astronomer and geologist who served as one of the scientific consultants for Deep Impact, lending his expertise to help make the film as scientifically accurate as possible. Shoemaker was famous for co-discovering the Shoemaker-Levy 9 comet with his wife Carolyn and astronomer David Levy in 1993, which became the first comet ever observed colliding with another planet when its fragment struck Jupiter the following year. On July 18, 1997, while the film was in post-production, Shoemaker was killed in a head-on automobile collision in the Australian outback. He had been traveling through the remote Northern Territory, searching for impact craters as part of his ongoing research when his vehicle crashed on a blind curve. His wife Carolyn survived the accident with injuries, as did the other driver involved in the collision. The tragic irony was not lost on the filmmakers or audiences who knew Shoemaker's story. Here was a man who had dedicated his career to studying cosmic impacts and asteroid threats, only to die in a terrestrial impact of his own. The film's opening scene, where Dr. Wolf races down a dangerous mountain road and crashes into a semi-truck while trying to warn the world about the comet, became an unintentionally haunting tribute to Shoemaker's real-life fate. When Deep Impact was released in May of 1998, Shoemaker received a posthumous credit as a Comet Advisor, making his contribution to the film a lasting memorial to his scientific legacy. CNN refused the movie deal. When screenwriters Bruce Joel Rubin and Michael Tolkien were developing Deep Impact, they originally wrote the character of journalist Jenny Lerner, played by T. Leone, as a reporter working for CNN, the cable news network. The writers felt that having Lerner work for the well-established news organization would add credibility to her investigative storyline and make her role in uncovering the government's comet cover-up more believable to audiences. However, when the filmmakers approached CNN about featuring their network prominently in the disaster film, the news organization flatly rejected the opportunity. CNN executives deemed it inappropriate for their brand to be associated with a Hollywood blockbuster about the end of the world, likely concerned that their participation might compromise their reputation as a serious news source or create confusion about their editorial independence. With CNN out of the picture, the producers needed to find another major news network willing to be featured in the film, since Jenny Lerner's job as a television journalist was central to the plot. MSNBC, which had launched just 2 years earlier in 1996 as a joint venture between Microsoft and NBC, eagerly stepped forward to fill the void that CNN had left behind. Unlike CNN, MSNBC executives saw the movie placement as valuable, publicity that could help raise awareness of their relatively new cable news channel. The network was still working to establish itself in the competitive cable news landscape, so appearing in a major Hollywood production starring Morgan Freeman, Robert Duvall, and T. Leone represented a significant marketing opportunity that they were happy to embrace. As a result, throughout Deep Impact, viewers see MSNBC logos, graphics, and branding prominently displayed during Jenny Lerner's television segments. The network's willingness to participate in the film gave them extensive screen time in what became one of the highest-grossing movies of 1998, potentially reaching millions of viewers who might not have otherwise discovered the channel. The secret Armageddon reference cut. In one of the most awkward coincidences in Hollywood history, Deep Impact originally contained a direct reference to its summer blockbuster competition that had to be hastily removed during post-production. During President Beck's crucial press conference scene where Morgan Freeman's character addresses the nation about the incoming comet threat, the original script included a line where the president reassured Americans by saying, "Life will go on, we will prevail. This is not Armageddon." The line was written and filmed as part of the president's attempt to calm public fears about the extinction-level event, with the word Armageddon being used in its traditional biblical sense to reference the end of the world. However, the filmmakers had no idea that their studio competitors were simultaneously developing another asteroid disaster movie with that exact title, starring Bruce Willis and directed by Michael Bay. When the Deep Impact producers discovered that Touchstone Pictures was planning to release a film literally called Armageddon in the same summer of 1998, they realized their presidential dialogue had accidentally created an unintentional advertisement for their direct competition. The situation became even more problematic when they learned that both films would be hitting theaters within just 2 months of each other, setting up an inevitable head-to-head battle at the box office. Rather than risk giving free publicity to Michael Bay's film, the producers made the decision to edit out the "This is not Armageddon" line entirely during post-production. In the final version that audiences saw in theaters, President Beck's speech was trimmed down to simply say, "Life will go on, we will prevail," removing any reference to the competing movie. This behind-the-scenes editing change highlights how the intense competition between the two asteroid films affected even the smallest details of production, forcing Deep Impact's creators to modify their completed footage to avoid accidentally promoting their rival's blockbuster. James Horner's recycled soundtrack magic composer. James Horner created one of the most emotionally powerful soundtracks of 1998 for Deep Impact, but what many fans don't realize is that much of this stirring orchestral music got a surprising second life in a completely different type of film just 1 year later. Horner, who was known for his sweeping melodic themes in movies like Titanic and Braveheart, crafted a deeply moving score for the comet disaster film that perfectly captured the human drama and impending doom of an extinction-level event. However, in an unusual move that's rare in Hollywood film scoring, Horner took substantial portions of his Deep Impact compositions and recycled them for the 1999 Robin Williams science fiction drama Bicentennial Man. This created the bizarre situation where music originally written to underscore humanity's potential destruction by a massive comet was repurposed to tell the story of an android's 200-year journey to become human. The recycling was particularly extensive, with several of the most emotionally resonant themes from Deep Impact appearing almost unchanged in Bicentennial Man, just reorchestrated and adapted to fit the new film's pacing and dramatic moments. Music that had originally accompanied scenes of families saying goodbye before the comet impact was transformed to underscore Robin Williams' character Andrew's relationships with multiple generations of the same family as he evolved from robot to human. This practice of reusing film music, while not unheard of in the industry, created one of the most unusual genre crossovers in soundtrack history. Audiences who paid close attention to film scores could hear the same melodic phrases that had made them emotional during Deep Impact's tsunami scenes, now playing during Bicentennial Man's tender family moments. The transformation demonstrates how versatile and universal Horner's compositional style was, allowing music written for a disaster epic to work equally well in an intimate character study about artificial intelligence and humanity. The Comet Color Scientific Compromise. The creators of Deep Impact made a deliberate scientific compromise that highlights the technical limitations of 1998 visual effects technology, choosing visual drama over astronomical accuracy when depicting their deadly comet. In reality, comets are among the darkest objects in our solar system, reflecting only about 3% of the light that hits them, making them roughly as dark as charcoal or fresh asphalt, which is significantly darker than most people would expect. To put this in perspective, Earth reflects about 39% of the light that reaches it from the Sun, making our planet more than 10 times brighter than a typical comet. This means that if filmmakers had wanted to show the comet accurately, it would have appeared as an extremely dark, almost black object moving through the blackness of space, creating a visual challenge that would have been nearly impossible for audiences to see clearly on movie screens. The film's producers and special effects team were fully aware of this scientific fact, having consulted with real astronomers and comet experts during the development process. However, they quickly realized that the digital effects technology available in the late 1990s simply could not convincingly show a realistic dark comet against the black backdrop of space in a way that would be visible and dramatic enough for a major Hollywood blockbuster. Instead of struggling with the technical impossibility of making a black object stand out against black space, the filmmakers made the creative decision to portray their comet as bright white and highly reflective. This allowed them to create visually striking and easily visible space sequences that audiences could follow without straining to see what was happening on screen. The compromise demonstrates how even scientifically minded filmmakers sometimes have to choose between accuracy and practicality, especially when working within the constraints of available technology. The bright white comet became one of the most memorable visual elements of the film, even though it bore little resemblance to how such an object would actually appear in space. Zoo animals and jaguar warnings. One of the most unusual safety challenges during Deep Impact's production occurred during filming of the underground arc scenes, where animal coordinator Jules Sylvester found himself giving safety briefings that no movie set had probably ever required before. The arc sequence depicted the underground shelter where selected humans and animals would survive the comet impact, requiring the filmmakers to bring together an extraordinary collection of live animals alongside 1,000 human extras in the same location. Sylvester worked with animal companies across the entertainment industry to assemble an impressive menagerie that included lions, jaguars, hyenas, alligators, pythons, kangaroos, ostriches, buffalo, camels, elephants, zebras, cattle, chickens, and various birds. He jokingly noted that they had started the morning with 2 rabbits, though the implication was that this number might change throughout the day due to the presence of so many predators. The logistical challenge became even more complex because many of the larger and more dangerous cats had been raised to respond only to their individual trainers, making it crucial that the animals stay with their designated handlers. Sylvester strategically positioned 36 trainers and wranglers around the perimeter of the filming area, with many of these animal experts doubling as background extras to blend seamlessly into the crowd scenes. However, the biggest problem Sylvester encountered was the natural human tendency to want to interact with the animals, particularly among the extras who were not accustomed to working around dangerous wildlife. He found himself repeatedly walking through the crowd of background actors, delivering warnings. That would sound absurd in any other context, but were deadly serious on this particular movie set. As Sylvester recalled, he spent much of his time saying things like, "Excuse me, ma'am, could you please not pet the jaguar since he tends to want to eat you?" creating what was probably the most unusual set of safety instructions ever given to movie extras. The female director box office record. When Deep Impact opened in theaters on May 8, 1998, director Mimi Leder achieved a box office milestone that would stand unchallenged for an entire decade, though this groundbreaking accomplishment received surprisingly little attention at the time. The film earned $41 million during its opening weekend, making it the highest-grossing opening weekend ever for a film directed by a woman, a record that demonstrated Leder's ability to helm a major Hollywood blockbuster successfully. This achievement was particularly significant because female directors were extremely rare in the blockbuster film industry during the late 1990s, with most studios hesitant to entrust massive budgets and wide releases to women filmmakers. Leder had transitioned from television, where she had earned Emmy Awards for her work on the medical drama ER, to become one of the few women directing big-budget action and disaster films in Hollywood. Deep Impact's opening weekend performance was impressive by any standard, not just for a female-directed film, as it managed to beat the opening of Twister and earned the 10th highest opening weekend of all time up to that point. The film went on to gross $349 million worldwide against an $80 million budget, proving that audiences would embrace blockbuster entertainment from female directors when given the opportunity. Leder's record remained unbroken until 2008, when Catherine Hardwicke directed the first Twilight film, which earned $69 million during its opening weekend. The 10-year gap between these two achievements highlights how infrequently women were given opportunities to direct major studio releases during this period in Hollywood history. Despite Deep Impact's commercial success, Leder faced significant challenges getting subsequent directing opportunities, illustrating the industry's tendency to give male directors multiple chances after failures while holding female directors to much higher standards. Her pioneering box office achievement represents an important but often overlooked moment in the ongoing effort to increase female representation behind the camera in major Hollywood productions. The release date Easter egg Deep Impact contains a subtle Easter egg that creates a meta-fictional moment connecting the film's fictional timeline directly to its real-world release, though this clever detail went completely unnoticed by most moviegoers during their first viewing. In the opening sequence of the film, when astronomer Dr. Marcus Wolf is working at his computer after receiving Leo Biederman's photograph of the mysterious object in the night sky, viewers can briefly see the date displayed on his computer screen. The date shown on Dr. Wolf's computer reads May 10, 1998, which was precisely the date that Deep Impact was released in movie theaters across the United States. This means that the fictional discovery of the comet that would threaten all life on Earth occurred on the exact same day that audiences were sitting in theaters watching the story unfold, creating an unusual blurring of the line between the movie's reality and the real world. This type of release date Easter egg was relatively uncommon in major Hollywood films of the 1990s, making it a particularly clever touch by the filmmakers who wanted to add an extra layer of connection between the audience and the story. The detail required careful planning during post-production, since the filmmakers had to know their exact release date far enough in advance to include it in the computer screen graphics that appear early in the film. The Easter egg works on multiple levels, suggesting that the events of Deep Impact are happening in real time as audiences watch them, which adds an extra sense of immediacy and urgency to the comet threat storyline. Most viewers were likely focused on the dramatic tension of the scene and the exposition about the comet discovery. making it easy to miss this small but significant detail that connected the fictional astronomical disaster to the actual moment they were experiencing the film in theaters. Steven Spielberg's directing dilemma. Steven Spielberg's original involvement with Deep Impact created a chain of events that would dramatically alter the film's production and lead to one of Hollywood's most awkward competitive situations of the 1990s. Spielberg had initially planned to direct the asteroid disaster film himself, having been attracted to the project's focus on human drama rather than just spectacular destruction. But his schedule became complicated when his historical drama Armageddon required more time and attention than he had anticipated. When Spielberg realized that his commitments to Armageddon would prevent him from directing Deep Impact within the desired time frame, the producers faced a difficult decision about whether to wait for his availability or move forward with a different director. The situation became even more pressing when they learned that Touchstone Pictures had just announced their own asteroid-themed blockbuster called Armageddon, also scheduled for release in the summer of 1998. Not wanting to delay their project and potentially lose the race to theaters, the producers decided to find a replacement director immediately while keeping Spielberg on as executive producer. They chose Mimi Leder, who had impressed them with her work on television's ER and her recent directorial debut with The Peacemaker, making her one of the few women directing major Hollywood blockbusters at the time. What made the situation even more remarkable was that Leder accepted the job completely unaware that she was about to become part of an unprecedented summer movie showdown. She had no idea that Michael Bay was simultaneously directing a competing asteroid film with a much larger budget and major stars like Bruce Willis and Ben Affleck until well into Deep Impact's production process. When Leder finally discovered the existence of Armageddon, she was shocked by the coincidence and frustrated by the media's attempts to pit the two films against each other. She later said, "I couldn't believe it, and the press was trying to pit us against each other. That didn't feel good." The dying cinematographer's final work. Behind the cameras of Deep Impact, a tragic personal drama was unfolding that none of the cast and crew fully understood until it was too late, involving cinematographer Dietrich Lohmann, who was secretly fighting a losing battle against leukemia while working on what would become his final film. Lohmann had previously collaborated with director Mimi Leder on her debut feature, The Peacemaker, and his experience shooting films for renowned directors like Rainer Werner Fassbinder had made him a respected figure in the cinematography community. During the production of Deep Impact, Leder began noticing inconsistencies in Lohmann's work that were completely uncharacteristic of his usual professional standards. She would receive excellent footage one day, followed by disappointing material the next, with lighting that didn't match her specific requests and camera work that seemed unusually spotty for someone of his caliber and experience. Leder knew something was seriously wrong, but felt helpless when Lohmann refused to discuss his obvious distress or explain the reasons behind his declining performance. What she didn't realize was that the 54-year-old cinematographer was under a doctor's care for leukemia and was secretly struggling to maintain his professional responsibilities while battling the devastating effects of his illness. The situation became so concerning that Lohmann had to take 2 extended absences from the production, forcing Leder to rely on a camera operator to fill in during his time away. Eventually, Lohmann left the set for a third and final time, departing 2 weeks before filming was scheduled to wrap, which meant that several scenes had to be completed without his involvement. Just 3 weeks after Deep Impact finished principal photography, Lohmann passed away at the age of 54. The cast and crew were devastated to learn that he had been fighting leukemia throughout the production, leading many to wonder whether his dedication to completing the film might have prevented him from seeking more aggressive treatment that could have saved his life. The helicopter-to-comet visual trick. One of the most memorable moments in Deep Impact occurs during the massive traffic jam evacuation scene, when thousands of panicked people abandon their cars on the highway and look up in awe and terror as the smaller comet fragment streaks across the sky above them. However, the dramatic reactions from all those extras were actually directed towards something much more mundane than a world-ending celestial object hurtling through the atmosphere. During filming of this crucial sequence, the background actors were instructed to get out of their vehicles and stare upward at a crew helicopter that was flying overhead in a predetermined flight path. The helicopter served as a practical reference point that gave the extras something real to focus their attention on, ensuring that everyone would be looking in the same direction and reacting to the same moving object in the sky. This practical approach to filming allowed director Mimi Leder to capture genuine human reactions and coordinated crowd movement without having to rely entirely on the actor's imagination or complex technical setups that might have been difficult to execute with such a large group of people. The helicopter provided a tangible focal point that helped create the sense of scale and shared experience that was essential for the scene's emotional impact. After principal photography was completed, the visual effects team went to work in post-production, digitally removing the helicopter from every frame and replacing it with the computer-generated comet that audiences see in the final film. This seamless substitution created one of the movie's most powerful moments, where the collective terror and resignation of thousands of people becomes palpable as they witness what they believe will be their final moments. The technique demonstrates how practical filmmaking solutions can be combined with digital effects to create convincing large-scale disaster scenes, giving the actors something real to react to while still achieving the spectacular visual elements that the story required for maximum dramatic impact. The traffic jam of 2,000 cars. The massive traffic jam evacuation scene in Deep Impact represents one of the most ambitious practical effects sequences of the 1990s, requiring the filmmakers to coordinate an extraordinary logistical operation that involved 2,000 actual vehicles and 2,500 real people on location in Virginia. This enormous undertaking was made possible by a fortunate timing coincidence that allowed the production team to access a stretch of highway that had been completed but not yet open to regular traffic. The filmmakers worked closely with Virginia transportation authorities to secure permission to use this brand new section of highway, which provided the perfect setting for depicting the chaotic mass exodus from the East Coast as the comet approached Earth. Having access to an actual multi-lane highway meant that the production could create a realistic traffic jam of unprecedented scale without disrupting normal traffic patterns or endangering civilian drivers. Coordinating 2,500 background actors and 2,000 cars required extensive planning and communication systems that resembled a small military operation more than a typical movie shoot. The production team had to organize parking areas for all the vehicles, establish safety protocols for managing such a large crowd, and create a system for directing the extras through their various actions during multiple takes of the complex sequence. The scale of this practical effect was particularly impressive for the late 1990s, when many filmmakers were beginning to rely more heavily on digital effects and green screen technology to create large crowd scenes. By choosing to use real people and real vehicles, the filmmakers achieved a level of authenticity and visual texture that would have been extremely difficult to replicate using the computer graphics technology available at the time. This massive practical setup created one of the most convincing disaster movie evacuation scenes ever filmed. With the genuine chaos and scale of thousands of people and vehicles providing a visceral sense of panic that enhanced the film's emotional impact. Arthur C. Clarke's uncredited inspiration. Arthur C. Clarke, the legendary science fiction author behind classics like 2001: A Space Odyssey, found himself in an unusual position regarding Deep Impact when his novel The Hammer of God served as a major inspiration for the film but received no acknowledgement in the final credits. Clarke's 1993 novel dealt with a similar premise of an asteroid threatening Earth and humanity's desperate attempts to prevent global catastrophe, making it a natural source of inspiration for the filmmakers. When Deep Impact was initially announced in industry publications back in 1995, the project was officially described as being based on both the classic 1951 film When Worlds Collide and Clarke's The Hammer of God. Steven Spielberg had actually acquired the rights to Clarke's novel specifically because he was interested in developing an asteroid disaster story, and the book's scientific approach to the subject matter aligned well with his vision for a more realistic take on the genre. However, after screenwriter Michael Tolkien was brought in to do a major rewrite of the script, the story evolved significantly from its original sources, leading the filmmakers to make the decision not to credit either When Worlds Collide or The Hammer of God in the final film. This creative choice meant that despite Clarke's novel being a foundational inspiration for the project, his contribution went completely unacknowledged when audiences saw the finished movie. The situation became even more problematic when the film's marketing and publicity campaigns actively promoted Clarke's connection to the project, using his famous name and the novel's reputation to help generate interest in Deep Impact both before and after its theatrical release. Clarke reportedly became disgruntled about this arrangement, feeling that his work was being used to promote a film that gave him no official credit, creating an awkward situation between the celebrated author and the Hollywood production. The Million Cubic Feet Fog Factory, the special effects team working on Deep Impact, created one of the most ambitious practical fog operations in film history, consuming an astounding 1 million cubic feet of liquid nitrogen every single day during the filming of the comet sequences. This massive undertaking was necessary to achieve the realistic gaseous atmosphere and steam effects that surrounded the comet in the space scenes, creating the visual impression of ice and other materials vaporizing as the celestial object traveled through the vacuum of space. Industrial Light and Magic, the renowned effects company handling Deep Impact's visual effects, made the decision to use practical fog effects rather than relying entirely on computer-generated atmospherics because they wanted to achieve the most realistic possible look for the comet's tail and surrounding debris field. The liquid nitrogen created dense, billowing clouds that could be photographed in camera and then enhanced with digital effects in post-production, giving the final images a natural texture and movement that would have been extremely difficult to replicate using only computer graphics. The scale of this liquid nitrogen operation required careful coordination with industrial gas suppliers who had to deliver massive quantities of the supercooled substance to the filming locations on a daily basis. The production team had to maintain proper storage and handling procedures for such large amounts of liquid nitrogen, which becomes gaseous at -196 degrees Celsius and expands dramatically when it transitions from liquid to gas state. This practical approach to creating the comet's atmospheric effects represented a significant financial investment and logistical challenge, but the results justified the expense by providing some of the most convincing space-based fog and vapor effects that audiences had seen in a disaster film up to that point. The combination of real atmospheric effects with digital enhancement helped establish the comet as a tangible, threatening presence rather than just a computer-generated object floating through empty space.